Hi there, my name's Paul, and I've just finished the 3-day intensive course with UAVAir down at Plumpton Racecourse for the unmanned aviation qualification. And I passed. I should say that I'm not at all connected with UAVAir, and so this is an independent video. And the reason I'm doing it is to try and simplify, I suppose, the process of getting to grips with some of the course study material. So when you sign up with UAVAir, you log into their web portal and you download 5 documents, which are the welcome pack, the course study manual, the quick reference handbook, the exam reference material, and the skills test guide. And if you were to perhaps open the exam reference material by mistake first, you might just give up on the whole idea, because it's quite a daunting package, that, so don't look at that one yet. So the most important document that you download, and the one that you spend the most time with, is the course study manual. Now that, I have to say, is a really well written and enjoyable read, and it forms the basis of one of the exams. You have 2 exams on the course. You have a multiple choice exam, you have a flight planning exam, and then you have a skills test. So the course study manual forms the basis of the multiple choice exam at the end of day 2. And as I say, it's a really well-written book. These are a pile of PPL books. I started studying for a PPL and ran out of money, but those are the books that I got. And, you know, that's just one subject, and it's a weighty tome. The course study manual preces those into an easily digestible document. Now, you have to read it. I read it first on a train trip from London to Leeds. So what's that, 2 hours? That's all it takes. And I read it probably 4 or 5 times before I attended the course. Bear in mind that the exam is an open book exam, so you can have that with you. You can have the course study manual open when you're doing the exam, but the critical thing when you've read it that many times and you're familiar with the subjects in it is you know exactly where to go to look for the answers. I mean, you know the answers, but you're double checking them. So you have a multiple choice question, you think, oh yeah, I know the answer to that, I will just double check it, and you can find it instantly. So that's one of the real benefits of reading the course study manual, is that it enables you to know exactly where to find the answer to a question in your exam. So my advice, yes, thank you. So the course study manual is a really easy to read document. It covers all the subjects you need to know about, and within that, if I just show you here on my iPad, it's very useful to have them on an iPad, which you can refer, you can dip in on any journey, just pop into a document. There's little boxes here, this one, the green boxes, and they're called top tips. Now, my top tip for the top tips is they are top tips. Anything that they say there as a top tip will probably come up in the exam, and if it doesn't come up in the exam, it's going to be really important. And you could probably memorize it. There aren't that many of them. But when they say top tip, it's like a hint for the exam that you really need to know that bit of information. And then you can read around the subject very simply, but memorize those top tips. So perhaps the next document you'll open up is a quick reference handbook that you might at first sight think is a condensed version of the course study manual, but it's not. In fact, when you open it up, you can see it's full of forms, like this flight planning form. 3 pages from there's a site assessment form, and there's checklists and emergency procedures and standard procedures and some copies of battery logs. And you're thinking, I'm just a single operator. Why do I need all this to fill out all these forms? But here's a spoiler alert. Not only is there a whole exam on that and filling out the flight planning form, which lasts, I think, an hour and a half, it also forms the basis of your 3rd test, which is the skills test. Your examiner on day 3, when he sees you flying your UAV, at least half of that exam is spent looking through the forms, these flight planning forms and the site assessment forms. So learning how to fill those in takes up quite a long chunk of the course. And the teachers are really good. They do take you through it in great detail. But if you can get your head around a couple of tools before you arrive in the course, you'll save yourself a lot of brain ache. And obviously you'll have done a lot of study with the course study manual. So you'll be familiar with the aviation chart. So you've done a lot of the groundwork there. But if you can become familiar with a website called Sky Demon Lite, which is an online flight planning tool, and get really familiar with that before you arrive in the course, you'll save yourself a lot of grief. And also Google Maps. There's facilities within Google Maps that I didn't realise that you can measure distances within Google Maps, and you can get coordinates. So in summary, when you're looking at the quick reference handbook, it contains a site planning form and a site assessment form, and those, learning how to fill those in, form the basis of your skills test, and also there's an exam on the site planning form. So it's really important you can do that, and the useful skills to be able to do that are Sky Demon Light, which is an aviation planning tool, so it gives you aviation charts containing airspace and airports and danger areas and areas of radio masts and tower, you know, everything you need is in there. If you can get used to using that bit of software, it's all free. You'll save yourself a bit of time when you get to the course. And also understanding Google Maps, which is a surprisingly powerful tool. I didn't really realise that you can measure distances in Google Maps, and you'll be doing that all the time, because the site assessment, when you do a site assessment, you need to know how far you are away from the nearest house, and you can do that in Google Maps. And also getting map references from Google Maps. You will be required to do that, and it's a really useful tool. The guys on the course will go through all this, but I'm just giving you a heads up and speeding the process up. So the last thing I want to talk about really is the actual flight test, the skills test, sorry. Now, if you open up the skills test guide, they tell you the manoeuvres you need to be practicing. And I bought my Phantom here, 6 weeks ago, and the only flights I've really done with it are practicing that. The critical thing is that you're in ATI mode. So in other words, you've turned off the GPS, apart from one very brief bit at the start of the test where you fly it in GPS mode. But after that, it's all in ATI mode. So this quadcopter in this case is still stable. It still sits there. You know, they're relatively easy to fly. It's not going to fall out of the sky. But what will happen is if there's a wind blowing, which there will be a wind blowing, it just wanders off. And it can wander off in any direction that the wind feels like, and gusts hit it. So suddenly, what you think is quite stable, it gets a gust and off it goes, and you think, so it's a different way to fly, and in fact, it's much more fun, and you feel you get a much more greater sense of satisfaction flying in ATI mode. But the critical thing is that whole skill test is done in ATI mode. So don't do any training with the GPS on. Turn the GPS off on your transmitter now on the next flight, and go and practice the manoeuvres that are on page, can't see it from here, anyway, a few pages into the skills test guide. Go and practice the manoeuvres. You basically fly 50 meters, 20 meters up, and you have to do a circle. Then you have a few more very specific manoeuvres to complete, and they're not difficult, but they're quite a long way away with a small aircraft like this. It's quite a long way away from you. So just getting used to the orientation of just looking at the distances. You certainly wouldn't want to turn up not having practiced that. So do as many practice flights as you can using the list of manoeuvres in the skills test guide. And what struck us all about the skills test was that we thought it would be, I think everybody thought it would be a real test of your flying skills. And in a way, obviously it is. But I think the examiners really want to see that you're not a foolish, dangerous pilot, and that you can control the aircraft. They want to see that you're a safe, competent pilot. They're not expecting you to be a complete expert, because they're assuming that you're relatively new to the industry. So what they're looking for is a safe flight, and a relatively accurate one. You can do the manoeuvres asked. They're not looking for you to be a genius. What they are looking for you to do, they're looking for a candidate to do, is to show that paper trail. So it's the site planning form. It's the site assessment, the flight planning form, sorry, the site assessment form. They want to see those filled in. And my top tip really is that you should behave on your skills test as if the examiner was a client who knew absolutely nothing about flying these things. So he'd ask you to come along and film that building, and when you're explaining to the examiner, pretend it's the client. So go through everything that is relevant to the flight, why you think you can do some things, why you can't do other things, hazards you've seen, everything. Talk through everything, and talk through in a very confident way. You've got to sell this to the examiner, but imagine it's the client. You've got to sell it to the client. You don't want a client thinking, oh, he doesn't really know what he's doing and he's a bit hesitant. So just behave as if you really know what you're doing, which of course you will at the end of the course. So something else that really struck me about the course was the keeping of logs. Now, I use the DJI app and it keeps logs. I also use Healthy Drones, which is a great website, and upload information to Healthy Drones, and I print out reports. But the examiner wants to see you printing out a flight log. So how long have you flown as pilot in command? How long has the aircraft flown? When are you going to replace the propellers? When are you going to replace the batteries? How much life has the battery got? How many cycles has the battery done? So it's a question of really taking it beyond a step of casual flying in monitoring how many, monitoring your batteries, monitoring your props, logging your hours, and being really aware of the technical side of that. And that forms part of a checklist. So, are we using batteries that have been fully charged? Have we tested, is the takeoff area safe? The checklists are listed here, but get used to using a checklist every time you fly casually. And obviously I haven't got time to go through everything here, and I'm trying to make this as brief as possible, but another critical part of the skills test, once again, it's not actually flying this, but it's critically important, is briefing. Now, as a single pilot, I'm standing there, I'm not going to brief myself, am I? So I'm not used to briefing, so it was a bit of a challenge. But imagine you were with a client, or imagine you were with an observer who was helping you. But I think especially a client or somebody who's not familiar with the process, briefing is really important. You can test it on a member of the family or take a friend with you. Practice briefing before you go on your skills test, because I was a bit uptight about that, because it was the first time I'd ever really briefed somebody. So take your kids out or something and brief them. And when I mean briefing, I mean before you start flying, you say, what happens, for instance, if I as a pilot collapse and the Phantom's flying over there and it's in ATI mode? Right, so, for instance, I briefed my observer, my examiner, that there's the return to home button, and I told him what will happen when you press it. So you press it and then describe the process, so that if you knew nothing about it and I did collapse, then the person with you would be happy and would understand what's happening. And of course, on your site planning form, you've written down telephone numbers of hospitals and police stations and maybe, landowners. So if something happens, then you've got that bit of paper that's got all the telephone numbers on it. So the person who's left stranded in a field while you're having a convulsion knows exactly what to do. And lastly, just lastly, it was very interesting how a lot of people turned up with iPads and a lot of people turned up with laptops, and I turned up with both, typically. And how it turned out was that the iPads are great for looking at the course documents. They're great for taking on a train with you to flick through and revise. But on the day, because we had 9 tabs open in our browser for flight planning, and we were working from the left-hand tab to the right-hand tab, and there's quite a methodical process of how you go through that flight planning, and the instructors go through all that with you. And it was so much easier on the laptop, and it was really difficult on the iPad. So what was odd to see was that people were being held back not by their lack of knowledge, but by the technology. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of iPads. But when you're using SkyDemon Lite and you're trying to do waypoints, and it's just not intuitive on there, whereas if you're using a mouse or a trackpad, it is intuitive. And having 9 tabs open was very easy. And it was just so much easier. When I was doing my exams, I had my course study manual open on here, and you know what? It was just quicker doing that, to go through different pages to find out information. So I would definitely bring a laptop and leave the iPad at home. Let me try and summarize then quickly. Number 1, course study manual. Read it as many times as you can. It's a really enjoyable document. Well, I thought it was an enjoyable document. It's well written, it's quite funny in places, and it forms the basis of the entire course. And then the quick reference manual. In there is the flight planning forms and the site assessment forms. Get used to trying to fill those in by using SkyDemon Lite and Google Maps and any other resources you can think of. Weather tools. There's a list of websites in the back of that manual. Try and use them all. You can work it out, but if you can get used to using SkyDemon Lite before you arrive on the course, you'll have saved yourself a lot of grief. And then for the skills test, more than half of that. The flying is only 20 minutes or less, 15 minutes flying. I think they're assuming you can fly, and you have to perform the manoeuvres, so practice the manoeuvres. They're not expecting perfection, and they're not difficult manoeuvres, and that's great fun. I spent a really good fun month doing that. So the majority of the skills test actually involves the examiner looking at your flight planning and your site assessment and your briefing. So that they want to see that you're safe, and they want to see that you've got a paper trail and you've thought about your flight, and you can justify everything about why your flight is dangerous or it isn't to the examiner, and that's what the course is about. The course is about making you a safe pilot. And on that skills test, they're testing your paperwork skills as probably more than your flying skills. So, and lastly, bring a laptop and not an iPad. So good luck, and hope you enjoy it.